Hi everyone, welcome back to the Evermore YouTube channel. It's Chris and Mark back with a slightly different show, as you can see from the title there. We are not doing what's going on. No, it is the end of the season, so we are going to go through the squad with a fine-tooth comb, and we are rating the squad, as you can see in the title there, and we're going to go through goalkeepers and defenders in this episode. And just before we get stuck in, I'm going to explain the rules to you, how we're going to handle this, Mark, so you know, as well as everyone else who's watching as well, and I can remind myself. So we're going to go through the goalkeepers and the defenders. We're going to mark them out of 10. We're going to talk a bit about why we've given them that mark, and then we're going to decide, most importantly, whether we would keep or sell that player. So if that's the kind of thing you guys like, smash subscribe. Why not come and join us? Get us to 8,000 subscribers before the season starts. We're ambitious, we know, but hey, that's part of the project of Evermore, as we say. But we'd love you to come get us to 8,000. We really appreciate it. We've had loads of new subs this year, so thank you everyone who smashed that button. And if you haven't, why not do it? It's all free content. But if you want early access to videos like the one you're going to watch, you can be a member too as well and support the channel if you feel the need to. So, Mark, we're going to get stuck right in here with your favorite topic, which is goalkeepers, mate, as the resident goalkeeper of Evermore. So I'm expecting big things here. So pull up the goalkeepers, mate, and let's get stuck right into this. So we're going to start with Nick Pope, the main man himself. I'm going to let you go first, mate, as the resident goalkeeper. Marks out of 10 for Nick Pope.
Well, it's tough, isn't it? Because he's missed an awful lot of the season.
He has. He has.
And to preface it by saying that, I mean, he has missed a lot of football. What has he played? 15 Premier League games this season, which for your number one is not great, but that's not his fault. In those games, I mean, it's really telling. And I think jumping ahead to kind of who the next goalkeeper will cover is, it's really telling just how much Nick Pope has missed, and missed massively by the defence in front of him as well. But you look at the games that Nick Pope played, you look at the number of goals he conceded. He was just over a goal a game in those 15 Premier League games. He is the number one at the moment. Whether that will be the same going forward, we'll see over the coming weeks. But I think Nick Pope for me is a solid 7 for I guess the little amount that we've seen of him this season. But he not perfect, but really, really telling contributions. Sort of some in Europe, and then particularly in those games in the league. If you look at his stats, and I know we always use FBref for a lot of our stats work, especially when we're doing rumour videos, but he sits in the high percentiles for an awful lot of the goalkeeper stats. The one I always kind of key into, and I kind of move away from sort of save percentage, because I don't think it really tells the overall story. If you look at post-shot expected goals minus goals against, he sits in the 98th percentile with plus 0.27. So he's saving almost work out as a third of a goal a game. He's worth points. He brings you points. He saves you. He in that regard, he will win you games. And I think he's been massively missed for that huge chunk of the season since his shoulder injury.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it is evident. You're right. The kind of drop off in form, the games where we conceded silly goals, and it seemed to be the same goal over and over again. We'll get into the replacement for Nick Pope when he went off of that shoulder injury against Manchester United when we won that game. And it was almost to that point you could see Newcastle's season start to wobble because we didn't have a good enough backup goalkeeper. And you're right, Mark. I mean, the stats are there from the most important stats. I mean, I think just to break it down, probably in the pure semantics, really, is that Nick Pope is just a more assured goalkeeper. He keeps more clean sheets. He's quicker off his line. He sweeps up better, doesn't he, as well, than the next guy we're going to talk about. He comes off his line a lot quicker. You know, the distance of where he carries a lot of his actions out beyond his 12-yard box, which can't be said the same for the next guy we're going to talk about. And that's key, I think, in modern-day goalkeeping, because you have to be able to do that and plug that gap if your defenders are pushing up a bit. And, you know, we seem to have a centre-half who thinks he's Maradona sometimes and goes on mazy runs and skins 10 people, which we'll get on to him in a minute. But having a keeper that can step out and do that kind of thing is paramount in the modern game. So I would agree with you on Dubravka. I would give Nick Pope, I'm jumping the gun. On Nick Pope, I would give Nick Pope a 7 out of 10 as well. I think the injuries have definitely, you know, prevented him getting higher scores, and also I think prevented Newcastle getting higher up the league. I don't know. There's a lot of rumours about Nick Pope. We're going to get onto the big question in a minute. A lot of rumours about Nick Pope, in the close season here, but he come back in against Brentford. Personally, I think he should have come in against Man United, even Brighton. Possibly we could have been sitting in Europa League positions and not worried about the FA Cup final at the weekend. But he made a great save against Tony. He didn't look like he was rusty to me, Mark. And the big question is, what is he, 31 years of age? Would you keep or sell Nick Pope? I would keep him. What would you do?
Well, he's just in 32.
32.
Back middle of April. And at the moment, I keep him. I think
unless you get better. Unless you get better. That's
I think that's
younger, better, fitter. Mamardashvili, Aaron Ramsdale.
Well,
one of those
that's
two.
who I was going to come to. So if you're looking at, if you're looking at Ramsdale's going to want to come in as a number one. Mamardashvili, maybe you can get him to come in as part of the building of the project and be Pope's successor. Pope will start next season with potentially then Mamardashvili taking over later on or going into the following season. But the project is there set out for him. For me, I think he's worth an awful lot of points. I know people have sort of said, well, the injuries, is that a worry now? I think that's the second time he's had a really serious shoulder injury where it's kept him out for a long period of time. So is that worth the risk of keeping him around? You're right. If you can get better, fair enough. But I think for now, if you're not shopping in the Alisson, the Edison, that sort of range, if somebody like that was to come in, fine. I'd be completely agreeable with letting him go. But if you're in that sort of mid to range or the younger goalkeeper to come in and learn and be part of the long-term project that Newcastle is, then I think Pope stays and he's the elder statesman of the goalkeeping corps at that point, and he's the one that the younger guy can come in and learn a little bit from and ultimately step aside. That's the way I would look at it.
Absolutely, yeah. I don't think Eddie will want to lose him. I think he's part of that leadership group. I think he's, and Nick Pope will want to get back in the England fold as well. He's maybe a bit unlucky not to be in the Euro squad. Obviously fitness and game time has prevented that as well. But I can't see Eddie wanting to lose him. But there's a lot of rumours about Ipswich, which is obviously his hometown team that are back in the Premier League, first time in 20 years. Maybe Pope will fancy a move back there. I don't know, but we'll watch that in terms of rumour has it. The Mamardashvili noise is getting louder and louder.
Yeah.
Now with you, Mark, I can see him being brought in on the promise of, you'll be bled into the squad next season, and then he will be the inevitable replacement for Nick Pope in terms of the number one. And I really like the looks of that lad. So we'll maybe look at that with a bit more detail as the weeks goes on. But moving on to, so did you say you keep Pope as well? You did, didn't you? You said you keep Pope?
I think overall I would keep him.
I would do, yeah. So we've got 2 keeps, 2 sevens. We're agreeing. So that's good. A good start. So let's move on to the next goalkeeper, Martin Dubravka. Let me get stuck into him. Let me sharpen my knife and fork here a little bit. So Martin Dubravka, and I always say this, and I always say this every time we talk about the goalkeepers, there was a reason we bought Nick Pope. There was a reason we upgraded on the goalkeeper. Martin Dubravka, once upon a time for Newcastle, was a very good goalkeeper. He came in for chump change, really, 4 million quid or something like that. He had a blinder against Man U in his debut. He was a very good shot stopper, and he was a decent keeper in a bad team. But as the team has evolved and the club has evolved, Martin Dubravka hasn't really evolved. He's got older. He's got a bit slower. His reactions aren't as great. He went on loan to Manchester United. We thought he was dead and buried then, and he come back, and he ended up back as number one because of the injuries to Pope. But looking at the kind of differences as well in terms of those ratings, Mark. So again, looking at Martin Dubravka, he's played 23 games in the Premier League, which is awful, really, for your second choice goalkeeper to play that once in the Champions League. In terms of his stats, the main stats there. So his kind of projected XG goals against, he's in the 59th percentile. His actual goals against, he's in the 13th percentile. Save percentage, I know you don't dwell too much on it, but he's in the 41st percentile, whereas Pope's obviously in the higher ones. But the big thing for Dubravka, and the thing that I think causes him the most trouble, Mark, is his kind of defensive actions. He's only moving in terms of a distance. He's literally in the width of his own box, and he doesn't come out quick enough. We've seen that so many times, how many goals were conceded since he's been in goal, with players just running through the middle, and he's glued to his line. He's too slow to come off. When he comes off, he makes himself small, not big. Martin Dubravka, for me, 5 out of 10, and I would get rid. What's your take on him?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about those actions. Like Nick Pope, defensive actions outside of his penalty area is 1.7 a game. He sits in the 92nd percentile, and his average distance of those actions is 17.5 yards, and that's
he's 5 yards ahead. Exactly.
He's a good sweeper keeper. He may not be the best with his feet, but he can read the game well, and he can sweep up and clear those opportunities that the opposition have as they break. He's very good at doing that. Dubravka, his defensive actions outside the area are under 1 a game, and the average distance is 12.8 yards. I mean, he's penalty spot. I mean, it's chalk and cheese between the two of them in terms of how they read the game, and that bleeds over into the defence, because the confidence then that the defence have in the goalkeeper behind them, it's just not there with Dubravka. The number of times that we've seen them ignore him with the ball, and as I said before, Pope isn't the greatest with his feet, but he's reliable enough for them to trust him to just play the sort of the simple pass. With Dubravka, that you see them time and time again ignore him and try and look for another pass, and the number of times that the defenders are making last-ditch tackles in areas where you'd expect your goalkeeper to be picking the ball up. You only got to look at the last couple of games and things like that will happen where, there's players going in front of the Emil Kraft was one right in front of the goalkeeper, because there's no shout, there's no communication coming from him, and he's not where he should be. And
no,
it's not all on him, and I
Goalkeepers Union.
Well, yeah, to be a little bit fair to him, he hasn't had Trippier in front of him for a huge chunk towards the end of the season. He hasn't had Botman in front of him for a massive chunk of that second half of the season. You've missed Joe Linton since the FA Cup game. So there are extenuating circumstances, but for me, it's the confidence that then the players that are playing in front of him have, and they look like they don't. For me, I would go for Dubravka. I would go somewhere between probably a 4 and a 5. That may sound harsh, but he just doesn't fill me with any confidence at all.
Yeah, I think it's definitely time to get rid of it. And I think that is going to be the case. I think the noises, the links to goalkeepers already. I don't think it's necessarily Nick Pope's position that's under threat. It's definitely Martin Dubravka's. And I don't think we'll see him in a Newcastle shirt again, mate. I think that's pretty much a given. Yeah, so we're in agreement there. So would you get rid of Dubravka?
Yeah, I think he's got a year left on his contract. You might pick up a bit of chump change for him.
4 or 5 million. What we paid for him?
Not even that. Maybe he's 1 or 2 million from you. You move him on. You get £40,000 a week off the wage budget I think he's on. He's one of those you thank him for his service and you let him move on to somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think that's a good shout. We're in agreement there on that one as well. It's 2 for 2 so far, mate. We are going to argue at some point, I'm sure about this. So the other 2 goalkeepers, we can't really rate them because Karius only played 1 game, conceded 4 goals. And apart from being ridiculously good looking, as Zoolander would say, he's not really been given a crack at the whip. I think he's going to move on. I mean, he can probably feel himself a little bit unlucky, Mark, can't he? Because there was a lot of shouts at one point to replace Dubravka with Karius. He is a very experienced goalkeeper, and in terms of his attributes, he's kind of been thawed out of cryostasis, and dropped into goal against massive opposition in big games like the Carabao Cup final and Arsenal away and stuff like that. And it's just I feel a bit sorry for Karius, but by the looks of it, he'll not be short of suitors over in European football, Germany or Italy or wherever it may be. I think his missus is Italian, isn't she? I think, and works over there. So I think it probably suits him as well to move on, doesn't it?
I think she was very keen for him to move to Italy. I think that was apparent back in sort of December, January time. But yeah, I think
possibly Fabregas's team, maybe that newly promoted team.
Yeah, maybe because
Como. Yeah,
it's weird because when he played in the cup final last year, I thought he had a good game. But
I think he was all right as well. Yeah,
he didn't
rusty. I
really
think Pope saves
yeah,
that goal where he doesn't get his hand up quick enough. But so that's been ultra
possibly.
critical.
But
Ultra critical.
that's a real guesswork because you don't know how Pope would react or what position he would be in at
True.
that point. So it's
Very true.
really you can't tell. The Arsenal game, I mean, you shoved in against a title contender in your only game of the season. He's been thrown to the wolves almost, and I guess unfortunate. I think I would probably have preferred to see Karius play at times in Dubravka. I think he just offers a little more confidence there than, even though he has his past. I think that there's definitely a goalkeeper in there that could have done a job.
No, absolutely. I think I agree with that. But it looks like he's moving on, and obviously getting onto the Scott Carson of the Newcastle United squad. That is Mark Gillespie there. He seems like a great fella, to be fair. He saved a penalty in the short and the pointless game in Australia. Not the one where the kids got battered 8-0, no, the first one. We won on penalties. But he's already agreed to stay on for another season. There's obviously a homegrown player there as well for European football. He's happy to carry waters on and off the pitch, make a couple of saves, have a bit of a crack, sing Ronan Keaton in the karaoke, and just seems to be, I think, a character. Eddie made a point of jumping on camera and talking about how much work he puts in behind the scenes. And I'm sure he is a really good pro, but he's very, very small possibility of him getting into this lineup, into this squad, unless, we have a complete disaster with goalkeepers. Touch wood. Let's hope that doesn't happen. But I think these three in front of him will improve next season. Hopefully Pope will still be here, but if he moves on and you buy better, you buy better. But the other two keepers there alongside, Karius away, say Mamadashvili comes in or Ramsdale comes in or something like that. That's increasing the quality overall of the goalkeepers. But obviously, there's no point in saying keep yourself at Gillespie because he is staying. Do you think it's the right move? It's one of them, do you think? Or
yeah, look, it's you joke about the Scott Carson thing, but you kind of understand the logic of it. You need a third goalkeeper in European competition. You need homegrown players in that squad. He ticks boxes in that regard, and he costs you absolutely peanuts. He's on 10 grand. I mean, he's the best gig in show business, isn't it? 10 grand a week. Sit on half the time he's not even sitting on the bench because he doesn't make the matchday squad. But he gets to train a few days a week. He gets to play football and gets paid 10 grand and doesn't actually have the pressure of playing the actual game. So there you go. But it makes sense to keep him around in that regard for another year. Hopefully, another year on, the academy is getting better. You start to see maybe some more younger players through. You're bringing in younger players from around the world or around England and the UK. Players like Gillespie can then be moved on at that point. But I think it does sort of make sense.
No, absolutely. I can't really disagree too much with that. So we're done with the goalkeepers there. We agree on the goalkeepers, which is great. So now it's time to move into defence. We're going to start with the centre halves, Mark. So we're bringing up these wonderful buggers here. Now that just shows you the highlight of our squad in terms of the lack of depth in the squad. Now we haven't put the likes of Alex Murphy in there. We haven't put the likes of Dummett in there. He is in the next category because he is technically classed as a fullback on the squad roster. So we're going to stick with the kind of four main defenders. Now, all of the transfer stories doing the rounds, it's looking very, very likely that Lloyd Kelly and Tossin are probably going to come in as two defenders, which I think improves, the centre back situation, Mark, as well. But let's start with the Hollywood wonderful bastard that is Fabian Schär. What a footballer this guy is! What a season he's had for us. I think he's been a constant. He's such a good player, for what he does defensively, but what he creates as well. Looking at his FB ref stats there, loads of them are in the green. In terms of his progressive passings, up in the 60s. His successful take-ons for centre half, he's in the 77th percentile. Progressive passes recorded as 80th percentile. His goals, are ridiculous. He's right up there in terms of his goals for centre halves as well. He's such a good player. My only problem with Fabian Schär is he's like 32 and he's not 27, because he'd probably be, pushing people for Ballon d'Ors. I think he's got 4 goals and 1 assists in the Premier League, and 1 goal, 1 great goal, by the way, in the Champions League, which we all know which goal that was. Can he strike, indeed? But he brings calmness, he brings composure. to the back four. I love him. I think he's such a good footballer. I can't believe we need to let the Baron of Bacon run this guy out of the club. It's just scary as fuck to even think about that. But for me, Fabian Schär has been right up there with some of the most consistent performers in the league this season. Very seldom injured, always somebody you can rely on and count on. So for me, I'm giving Fabian Schär an 8, and I know he's getting on a bit, but I would still keep him next season, mate. So that's my score on Fabian Schär. How do you feel about this handsome Swiss bastard?
Yeah, look, I mean, some of his stats are incredible when you look at it. It is very much those high percentiles again, and look, he's got a hell of a dig on him, hasn't he? That goal against PSG was phenomenal. I'm thinking back over goals. That's probably my goal of the season.
It was incredible. Absolutely incredible, man.
Just the way that he sets it up, and you know, he hits it as he's slipping, as he's falling, and he's buried it from what, 25 yards, and it's just a sensational strike, and he's got that in his locker. We've seen that before from him, and he weirdly should probably get more, and he's allowed to just wander forward. But you talked about his passing. You know, he sits in those high percentage percentiles for sort of passes into the final third of the field, passes into the penalty area, progressive passes is high. This is what you want as in that sort of ball playing centre back. You want them to be able to move the ball. You want them to be able to influence the game from centre back, be a point of creativity from that to move the ball too. And again, you talked about sort of take-ons and things like that. It's just I think I'm trying to think that the carries with the ball maybe is the one thing that you see an awful lot with him. I'm struggling to get my words out there, but you see an awful lot from Fabian Schär that he likes to get the ball and he likes to move forward with it. The progressive carries from centre back in the 69th percentile. Those carries
it's that arrogance, isn't it? That he has almost
just
that belief in himself to carry the ball forward. Even at 32, I'm going to take on 4 players. I'm going to pick a pass. I'm going to have a shot. You know, and it's just it's like I say, the only issue is his age, I think, Mark. And how do you come up with a contingency plan for this? I mean, the two that we mentioned in terms of Tosin and Kelly, you know, 26, kind of 27-year-old players. You know, Tosin looks like he's good with the ball and stuff as well. Maybe he's right-footed. Maybe he could be Schär's, you know, long-term successor. But what would you give Schär out of 10 then, Mark? What's your mark for him?
Yeah, I think probably maybe a 9 even. I think he's been exceptional this season. He's played, is it 47 games this season? 47 goals. My God, that would be a hell of a return. He's played 47 games this season. It's funny you talked about you know, not being injured as much. He's always injured. He's always carrying a knock. He's always holding his head. But he shakes it off and he gets on with it. And he's been exceptional. And especially with the main man alongside him being missing for that huge chunk of the season as well. I think he's really carried that defence at times, and it's been rocky. There's an awful lot of goals been conceded at times, but he's never really, for me, put a foot wrong. And I just think that is the measure of the player. And for a man who was pretty much on his way out the door under Bruce, he's gone. He wasn't staying. And he's been exceptional since Eddie Howe's taken over.
Absolutely. Keep or sell then?
Definitely keep.
Yeah, 100%. And for me, I think he'll go down as one of the best centre-halves Newcastle's ever had. And at £3.5 million from Deportivo La Coruña, probably one of the best signings we've ever made in the club's history, to be honest with you, in terms of a bargain. What a player. He costs you a fortune in the market now. So brilliant. Moving to his partner in crime. It's been a tough season for the Rolls-Royce. So Rolls-Royce has been in the garage quite a lot this season, mate. I think he's only played 17 times in the Premier League with 2 goals and 2 assists, funny enough, and once in the Champions League. So we have missed Sven Botman. Even though he hasn't played, I mean, his stats are still there. His pass completions up in the 90th percentile in terms of his passes completed per 90 minutes. He's in the 85th percentile. You know, touches 80%. his assists are maybe massively skewed because he's only played 17 games and got 2 assists, so he's 97th percentile. But in terms of a player, we haven't really seen the same Sven Botman this season. He's had these niggly injuries, the mental ACL situation where he played on with it. And weird enough, even though he played injured, he was still better than probably most of the centre halves underneath him, even though he was knackered. But it's tough for me to give Sven Botman top marks because he's been so off this season.
Yeah.
And I hate doing halves, but I'm going to have to do a half if I'm thinking about the other players I'm going to score. I'm probably going to give Sven Botman, it's a tough one, it's a 6.5, I think, because we haven't seen the best of him and he's been injured quite a lot. So maybe I'm being harsh, 6.5 for Sven.
No, because you've kind of gone the way I might have gone, and I would say I think seven's probably too high because again we haven't seen an awful lot. There are times as well where he didn't look right. He didn't look like he was playing fully fit, and I think that's hampered him. And maybe that's not his fault as such, but he's definitely not looked the Sven Botman that we saw last season in that regard. And I think it's probably really harsh. And maybe this would have gone a 6, but only because we haven't seen him enough. And he's not really influenced the games quite as much as we would expect from him. So I think I would go with a 6, but that's with a huge asterisk that says that's mainly down to the injury timeout and the lack of real availability with fitness.
Absolutely, and this is a daft question, but keep or sell? 100% keep.
Oh, I'd sell him. I'd absolutely
get rid. Yeah, Arsenal can buy him for 20 million. They seem to be under offering for everybody, really. So we'll just have Arsenal for 20 million. But obviously keep. But we have to get him fit and right and ready for next season whenever he comes back, really. So yeah, Sven Botman hopefully fully fit next season, and that would be something special. It really, really would. So moving on to the guy next to him, and I've been quite a critic of this guy over the years, and I think you have at times, maybe not as much as me, but I think from this season, certainly when Sven Botman was out, Jamal Lascelles really stepped up, Mark, didn't he, in terms of his performances? I mean, in terms of his games played, 16 matches played in the Premier League, 1 goal, 5 in the Champions League, and very difficult games in the Champions League as well. In terms of his stats, looking at his stats there, I mean, they don't make great reading, I think, because he played a lot of games where, maybe we did ship a lot of goals, certainly when the keeper got injured. But he did look a lot better. I mean, his aerials one, he's right up in the 95th percentile. He's very seldom beat in the air. His touches is decent enough. He's got 96th percentile for his touches. And in terms of his tackles are quite low. He's in the 19th percentile. His blocks are in the 58th. Clearance is 32. But I think what we saw with Lascelles this season, what Eddie managed to get out of him was, I mean, big games as well against likes of Kylian Mbappe and players like that. Not phased. He was up for the occasion. He's a funny one to sell because he was the one where everyone thought he was going to be the first out the door, where we kept improving this squad. He's 30 years old. He's obviously 31 in November. He's going to be injured next season, when the season kicks off. So the keep himself thing might be a bit of a redundant question. But for me, I'm going to give Lascelles, this might sound harsh, I've just said Botman's only getting a 6.5. I'm probably going to give Lascelles a 6, I think, really, because he didn't do anything fantastic. He didn't do anything really bad. He just put in some really good performances in the Champions League. He kind of led by example, really, at the back, but he's good at getting into rough and tumble battles with people like against Haaland. Weird enough, Lascelles plays Haaland quite well because he loves that physical battle. Whereas if you put a speedy striker against Lascelles, he'd probably be on toast because he's not the quickest. But I'm not sure how long he'll have at the club after this season. Especially with the 2 centre halves hopefully coming in on a free transfer, which increases the quality at the back. But yeah, I'd give Lascelles a 6, mate. How would you see Jamal Lascelles this season?
Yeah, I think again surprised a few with some of his performances.
He improved a lot, I think, from the season before.
He's come in and been very steady at times. He's looked really off at others, and let's be honest, there are other games where he's looked absolutely woeful. But in the main, in that early part, especially when he was playing, and you look at the games again. I mean, you look at the game against PSG, the cup game against City, for example, even I guess even the games. I think you're looking at the Arsenal game as well. Sorry, at St James's Park. He's played very, very well at times. And he's done a really solid job. He's not the answer. He's not a Champions League standard defender. And given the performance he's put in a couple of those games, that seems a little harsh. But we know Lascelles is ceiling. He's played right at that. I think this season there's no wiggle room for improvement there. I don't think we're going to see anything spectacular out of him. Had he not been injured, I would have been suggesting that he probably moved on. But I think you obviously get the benefit of his leadership and his experience for another season at the very least. I can't remember. Is his contract up at the end of next season? It is.
I think it is. Yeah,
it was due to end this season, wasn't it? But did he sign an extra year's deal?
Yeah.
So if that's the case, then do you know? I can't remember. If it is the case, then you get him for another year. Otherwise, it's a Matty Longstaff situation where he's injured but out of contract. But if he's got that extra year, I maybe would have let him go.
It does say expires June 2024. Here. It does say on FB Ref 2024. So
it'd be an interesting one to see because I can't. Do you know? I genuinely can't remember when whether he did he trigger his
extension.
Yes,
I think he did. He
played enough games to trigger
the extension. Yeah.
So he played enough games, I think, to trigger the extension for a year. So you get the benefit of him for next year. I mean, at this point in time in his career, you're not going to get anything for him because he's not got enough time left on his contract. Obviously, he's got the big injury that's going to keep him out into the start of next season. So the summer window is sort of moot in that point. You're not going to be able to sell him on. But I think just having a body in there for next season is probably a good thing. And then he goes at the end of his contract next season.
I think so. Yeah.
I think for me, I think generally with the surprise that I got from him, I'd probably give him a 6.5.
I was close. I was close to 6.5, but I just thinking about other players, I'm going to give 6.5 to and what they've done stats wise. I thought I would just shave it back to the 6 there, which is for me is generous for themselves. Because previously I would have given like a 4 or 5 probably.
I mean, if you go back to previous seasons, he'd barely touch a 4. But I think he's done the job he's been asked to do, and I think we've seen enough of him and enough good performances out of him, especially in that early part. The latter part of the season, I think form has tailed off, and I think so. Maybe 6.5 is a little high, but I just think those early games, that particular that would put my score at a slightly higher level.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and to be fair, we can't really say keep Orsell because he's injured for the majority of the season. Certainly, it'll be well into the season before he comes back. You know, whether he'll be back before the January window, I don't know. But I think if he hadn't got injured, I could probably have seen him go to one of the promoted sides coming up, because I think he'd be quite a good leader and captain for them, experience and all that. But you know, he is injured, so he will be staying here. You know, certainly through the summer. So moving on to BDB, Big Dan Burn. Now it's a funny one with Big Dan Burn. Now we've got him in as a centre back because he is a centre back, Eddie. You know that now. You've learned your lessons. He is a centre back. So it's quite a difficult one, this, for me, scoring Dan Burn. I love Dan Burn as a character. What a lad, what a guy, what a career he's had. He's gone right round the whole kind of football pyramid to get back to his hometown club that he was released at. His story is a brilliant story. Dan Burn is a shining example to any young player who's been released from an academy that you can still get back to where you want to be and still live your dream. You know, and I love that for Dan Burn as a bloke, as a Geordie. And he's putting some good performances this season, certainly at centre-half, but he's also putting some really shaky ones at left-back. So just kind of looking at his stats there. So he's played 33 times in the Premier League, 2 goals and 2 assists. 4 times in the Champions League, 1 goal. Again, you know who that was against. A brilliant goal as well. His stats, his passing wise, pass completion, 80%. So he's in the 66th percentile. Defensively,
I was going to say those stats for 66 are based against fullbacks. Against centre
Exactly.
backs, he sits in the 19th percentile.
Okay.
So
Yeah. So
there is that
let's look
between
at
the
the centre
two.
backs then. Yeah. Sorry, I haven't clicked the tag there. So yeah. So he's a lot higher up in terms of that. But in terms of his centre backs, tackles, he's in the 84th percentile. Blocks, he's in the 95th. Aerials one, which you would expect. 91st percentile. But again, there's two sides to the tail with Dan Burn. If you go back to the fullbacks where he played, the stats drop right down in terms of his passing and his carries and his take-ons and everything else. Defensively, still very, very good. But in terms of as a fullback, there was a left back massively exposed, certainly this season against pace, and not even against, with all due respect, big teams like the relegation teams with pace, ripping them limb from limb. It was not a good idea for Eddie Howe to play him there. It may have worked before when he had Joe Linton in front of him, but as you said before, Mark, like the goalkeeper, Joe Linton wasn't there to protect him. Joe Willock wasn't there to protect him. So he was left massively exposed time and time again. And I think that was a poor decision by Eddie. We're not scoring Eddie in this episode. He'll come at the end. But that was a really poor decision from Eddie in that regard. And that knocks Dan Burn's score down for me, Mark, in terms of the season. I look at him in two different positions. He's ended the season really well as a centre-half, but as a left-back, he's been, very exposed, very fragile, very weak at times in terms of his positional sense and his ability to defend and offer an attacking threat in the left back position. So I'm going to give Dan Burn a 6 out of 10, I think, for my score. But again, because it's blended between the two. If it was just centre half towards the back end of the season, he'd be up in the 7s. But I think I'm going to have to give him a 6 because of the two different positions.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's almost hard because I think he's obviously been put in that position, and
he'll play anywhere for Newcastle. He's playing goal for Newcastle.
He'll bleed black and white, won't he? So I think the decision to play him at fullback is obviously on Eddie, and I think when you saw the continued issues that he has, particularly against Luton, particularly against Forest, there were those two games where we really saw him be got at from that right hand side of the opposition's attack, and he really struggled. I mean, against Forest, he was brought off really early, wasn't he, in the second half, and that was one or twice. It was after he conceded the penalty, wasn't it? He'd been completely torn a new one,
and he should have been 20 minutes before that. To be fair,
yeah. I mean, realistically, he should have been off at half time in that game. But the switch to centre back, I mean, he is a centre back, and you switch him to centre back.
Night and day, isn't it? When you look at him play,
he's been absolutely brilliant, and he's really defended well. He's read the game much better. He's got himself into positions to make key blocks and key interceptions, and I think he's been exceptional from that point onwards. Really, I think that's probably from what the sort of the West Ham game onwards, isn't it? Yeah. And I think you're right. I think probably if you're scoring him from that game onwards, I think probably a 7.5.
Yeah, that's a good shot.
Fullback, which is the bulk of the season that he's played, I'd be giving him a 6, and I'd edge probably towards a. Yeah, I think 6 is right, just for the overall number of games that he's played and the difficulties that he's had, and it seems a little harsh because not all of that is his fault. He's a limited fullback. He doesn't have the pace to be able to keep up with those quick wingers. That's not his fault. But he has to be able to read the game better. He has to be able to go, well, Anthony Elanga's a million times faster than me. I've got to drop. I've got to be able to give him enough space so I can see what he's doing and I can get in front of him rather than playing from behind. I've forgotten the lad's name at Luton that tore him a new one as well.
Yeah, was it on Benga or something?
Benny.
Pieces. Yeah.
And again, he got himself caught by getting too close and too high. And then those he has to recognise. He's an experienced player. He has to recognise that those are issues. And for me, that brings his score up because he's not recognised those problems himself during games and been able to manage his own game. So, yeah, I think 6 is right. Keep yourself for Dan Burn. I mean, he's going nowhere.
I'd say keep.
he's got a year left, I think, on his contract, hasn't he?
Yeah,
So
I think so.
he may be one that you then see depart at the end of next season,
Yeah.
depending on where Newcastle are in the league and
Because
in
you've got
competition.
two huge injury issues in the middle there, and if Tosin and Kelly are coming in, they just basically plug that gap. So
Yeah.
I think Burn stays regardless because of that, really, doesn't he?
Yes. Yeah, you're not going to. He gives you a little bit of flexibility to be able to play if you were going to want to put him at fullback for the odd game if absolutely necessary. But Lloyd, I know.
I've shivers down my spine.
But Lloyd Kelly can do that too. Obviously, the
Yeah.
way that we've seen Hall will come to him has been exceptional. So he's probably going to be the main one. But for he does give you a little bit of flexibility in that regard. But he also gives you the homegrown status in terms of he's an English player in European competition. He ticks those boxes as well. So those sorts of players are invaluable to the squad in Europe. And I think again, it's for fuck if you probably wouldn't get an awful lot if you were to try and sell him now with
No,
a
I don't
year
think
left
you
on his
would. No.
contract. I don't
Again,
think
one of the promoted sides possibly buy him for a
possibly
very small figure, but yeah, I mean, I think
would that be
Big Dan
worth it.
Burn. Yeah, I think Big Dan Burn stays. We're going to get onto the wing backs in a minute, but just while you're watching along, guys, if you can like the video, really help the channel grow, and let us know. Again, subscribe if you want to as well, but let us know what your scores are so far for the players as well in the comments if you haven't already, and we'll do our best to jump in and reply and let you guys know what we think about your scores. So moving on to the wing backs or full backs, if you want to get old fashioned here. In terms of the last section of the defence, and starting off with Kieran Trippier. Now, this hurts my heart to even talk about Kieran Trippier in such a way, Mark. Before I get on to this in more detail, Kieran Trippier was a transformative signing by this football club. He was the first one to come in to take over, leaving Atletico Madrid for relegation fodder, doomed Newcastle United. He's been sensational since he's been in his football club. Not just what he's done on the pitch, off the pitch. He's been such a leader of men. The way he's welcomed players in, the way he was with Tonali as well, and all that other stuff. He's been such a brilliant servant for the club, but something has happened this season. The season for Kieran Trippier, a bit like Dan Burn, is almost in two different halves. He started the season so well. He started the season like the Kieran Trippier we all know and love. He's racked up 10 assists this season. And a lot of that was really predominant in the first half of the season. He's played 28 Premier League games, 1 goal, 10 assists. Again, looking at his stats, I mean, the big ones, his assists are in the 99th percentile. His expected assist, 97. His shot creation chances, 96. Passes attempted, he's in the 97 percentile. Progressive passes, 95. Blocks, 85. All of that sounds absolutely brilliant. But something happened to Trippier. There was loads of stories about off the pitch. We don't get into all that nonsense, but something was going wrong, Mark, with the player, kind of especially around about Christmas time. His head looked like it completely fell off. Then we had the January links to Bayern Munich, then the injuries, and then he's come back from the injuries. And unluckily for him, the lad next to him in a minute we'll get stuck into has come in and done really, really well. And almost that thought of the future has accelerated to the present. And Kieran Trippier, I really do feel at 34 years of age, he is now, I think it is, 34 years of age. He's going to be at the Euros unless he's injured. I think his better days are behind him now. I worry that his legs have gone. And because of that, the Trippier in the first half of the season for me, 7.5, 8 out of 10, possibly even pushing higher than that, maybe it's even towards the 9. But the Kieran Trippier we saw kind of from probably late November onwards has been a shadow of that player, Mark. So I'm going to give Kieran Trippier, and again, it's probably more weighted to what he did at the start of the season. I'm going to give him a 6.5 out of 10. And I can't believe I'm saying that because once upon a time, this guy was the player for us. But I think his legs have gone. And for me, he can't be the number one right back next season. That has to be the lad next to him, which we're going to get stuck into in a minute. What's your take on Trips?
So I think this will be the first one where we disagree a little bit. I think Kieran Trippier has struggled massively with fitness, and yes, you could argue that maybe his legs have gone, but I think his legs have gone particularly later on in the season. He's just not fit enough.
Just too many games as well, possibly.
He needed a rest, and God knows why he wasn't taken out of games earlier when he could have been. The Everton game, you go back to the absolutely gut-wrenching mistakes that he makes in that game. Chelsea in the cup as well, where those are the actions of a tired player, mentally and physically, and there is a ready-made replacement there in Tino Livramento, and Trippier needs time where he's not playing. He's not going to play 40, 50 games a season. He's 33. He's going to be 34 soon. He's not going to be able to cut it at the highest level for that number of games, but he's still really, really productive. All of his stats are really high in terms of it. You talked about his assists in the. I mean, in the league, isn't it? Is it all competitions? He's got 11 assists all season.
I think so. Yeah. All heavily weighted in the first half. As I say, he's nearly 8.5, 9 for me in the first half of the season, but the next half, he drops right off, mate.
It does, but I don't think it's time for him to go. Maybe his head was turned a little bit in January with the Bayern Munich links. You'd be forgiven for that to happen for where they were at the time and where they were playing. But there's an awful lot of
ex-Tottenham players, though, weren't they? Really just wanted all ex-Tottenham players. Surprised didn't bid for Dele Alli as well, to be honest with you. So.
Really getting the band back together. But I still think there's a hugely influential player in there, and coaching wise, particularly with Tino there. The amount that Tino Livramento can learn from Kieran Trippier, I think it would be an insane move to sell him unless he really wants to go. If he wants to go, then that's different.
Because that's fine. If he fancies one last big payday in America or something like that, or
something like that, I can kind of have got. And he's done a magnificent job since he signed it. He spent an awful lot of time this season injured, but just his influence on the side for when he played and when he was on the sidelines. Obviously last season he was incredible, and he started like a house on fire again this season, and it has tailed off. And age catches up with everybody. But I do think there's an element that he needed to be protected a little bit more by the manager. He needed time away. He needed time off from games. He needed Livramento to step into that position and be able to give him a break. I think, I'm like you. I mean, first half of the season, you're looking at 8s. That second half, from sort of the Everton game onwards, it's really difficult to give him anything over a 6 because he's been really poor, and that half of the season. I mean, although he's still got 5 assists since then. Is it? No, sorry, 3 assists since then. I can't count. He's just not been as productive. He's made more mistakes. He made mistakes in the Everton game, the Chelsea game. I think the Wolves game maybe as well was where he got caught out.
Yeah.
So there were the issues in terms of that, but I think overall probably a 6.5. And it seems incredible given just how influential he was to start with.
And the assists
rapidly tailed
ridiculous.
off. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. But if the set pieces have dropped off, everything's dropped off from what he once was. Now, you might be right. I mean, I'm struggling here between keep or sell because I'm looking at these players here. We'll get onto the rest of them here. And there's already 2 straight away that I want to get rid of. So I can't decimate the squad completely. And I was worried about Trippier's 120 grand a week wage. But there's another guy in here who I cannot believe is on 100 grand a week, which I'll definitely peddle straight away. So I'm probably going to say keep Kieran Trippier for the same reasons that you said as well. I think if you get one more season out of him, use him more sparingly. Tino has to be the number one, I think, for most games. Kieran can come in and play, games, certainly big, massive games where maybe, you're worried about potentially Tino in those games, maybe use Kieran's experience, that kind of a thing. You can maybe even move Tino over at left back and dress Hall for the same reason. So I think Kieran could still offer something to the squad, but I think you'd have to play a hell of a lot less games. And then I wouldn't be surprised if next season was potentially his last season in the game and he might move into coaching because he seems to have that coach aura about him. And he's got a lot of time for Eddie Howe, so maybe that's something he might consider doing. So we agree on that. 6.5. Would you keep Trips as well?
Yes, I think for me,
as a squad player, not as a starter necessarily for me.
Depending on his fitness, depending on the way he's on, you could make the argument that he starts next season, but he's very much that his game time is limited. The way that Livramento has sort of ended the season and he's performed at times, I think he really has to be the number one going forward in that right back role, because he is going to develop much more, and he's already shown signs that he will be streets ahead in that regard. He has age and pace and all those sorts of things on his side that Trippier, unfortunately, you wish Trippier was 10 years younger.
Absolutely.
You really do,
well,
because
if Trippier was like Share, they'd be worth 200 million quid each, probably, made the way they play. But it's a nice little segue moving into Tino. So this lad was signed in the summer. People questioned it. Why are we dropping all that money on a fullback? We've got Kieran Trippier, we've got Matt Target, then we signed Hall as well, which we'll get into in a minute. Now, Tino Livramento has been absolutely sensational since he come into this squad. People were raving about him. I heard Theo Walcott say he reminded him of Gareth Bale and stuff like that. I was thinking, what the fucking hell is Theo Walcott on about? And this lad, he's raw. There's part of his game he needs to sharpen up and shape up. There's no doubt, which I'm sure we'll get into in a minute. But in terms of what Tino Livramento has done, and for a kid who's, what is he? He's 21 years old. 21 years old. He's played 26 times in the Premier League. He's got 1 goal in that time as well. Looking at his stats against the other fullbacks there, obviously goals and things and assists aren't particularly great. That's something he has to learn off Kieran Trippier. But his pass completion per 90 minutes is 85%, so he's up in the 91st percentile. Progressive carries, he's up in the 84th percentile. He's got some rapid pace on him. Successful take-ons, 83 percentile. His interceptions, very good, 93rd percentile. So he's very good in terms of his positional sense, Mark. In terms of crossing the ball and creating a bit like what Kieran Trippier does. Granted, Kieran Trippier's assists a lot and come from taking corners, free kicks, those kind of things as well. You can't ignore that. But in the in-game play of crossing the ball, that's something Tino needs to work on. But his recovery as well, his ability to get back and put these last-ditch tackles in, goal-saving tackles we saw against Manchester City in the Cup and stuff like that as well. And for the age and the ceiling that the player has, he's played left-back and right-back, and he's been brilliant in both positions. For me, I'm giving Tino a 7.5 out of 10. I think he's had a great debut season for Newcastle. I think he's shown us he's ready to probably take that starting right back berth, especially in those games where we need that pace up and down that line, defensively and defensively. So I'm very excited to see what Tino can bring. The injuries concern me a little bit. I must admit, he's had some bad injuries for such a young lad. But pacey players generally do get injuries like this. But I'm very excited about Tino next season. I'm going to jump straight away and say keep 100%, but I'll give him 7.5 out of 10, mate. What would you give Tino?
Yeah, I think for me, a score for the season for him would be a 7. I think you're right, there are areas of games he's exceptional with. His ability to those recovery runs, especially when he's able to get back from deep, he's able to really put attackers under pressure when he's gone forward himself, and he's got that ability to lung burst and runs to get back and get himself in a position. He's done that really, really well. I want to see more from him in an attacking sense.
Yeah.
There's not enough of an end product at the moment for him to you look at the numbers that come from Kieran Trippier. Livermento's a million miles away from that at the moment, but he's 21. He's going to learn. He's going to develop. He's going to, I think, develop an understanding with whoever's playing in front of him.
And that's changed a lot from, hasn't it? He's chopped and changed with wingers, and that's been difficult for him.
And for an experienced player, that's a lot easier, I would imagine. Trippier has a particular role, doesn't he, where he's playing on the overlap. He's played an awful lot with Miggy. There's that understanding there. For Tino, that's not been there. And he's played, I think, particularly towards the end of the season, you've played more with the more inverted fullbacks, where they're not overlapping. They're coming up with the number of runs you see from Lewis Hall, and the same from Livramento from the right, where they're coming in through the some more central areas, getting towards the area. But I definitely do want to see more of him in an attacking sense. I want to see more assists from him. I want to see more shot and goal creating actions and big chances created from, because he's got the ability to do it. Injury wise, I understand he has missed a fair amount of time. He was missing for a month earlier in this year. I think he's missed 7-8 games in total or so this season. His big injury was his cruciate back in 21-22 when he was at Southampton. Hopefully we'd never see the like again for him. But he's got such a promising future, and there's a reason why Newcastle's fullbacks are being touted as future England fullbacks, because they've got an awful lot of time ahead of them, and they're already at a very, very good level. He's got a lot about him, Tino Livramento, and like I say, I want to see a little bit more from him. But he's been really, really good. I've been really, really impressed with him. For somebody who I was impressed with anyway, obviously from watching it previously, I've been even more impressed with him.
Absolutely. And 7 out of 10 for you and keep?
Oh, God. It's a
no-brainer.
Really. I'd say him, and I know we're going to come on to Lewis Hall now. For me, they're probably you're starting right back and left back.
I would definitely agree. And I think after the Euros in the summer, there'll be a lot of England fullbacks who will retire from international duty. And I think these two will definitely be on the radar for England in years to come. So moving on to sometimes the invisible man this season, Lewis Hall. We signed him from Chelsea. We all had high expectations from the highlight reel was doing the rounds of his 12 games he played for Chelsea. And then Eddie Howe even just didn't play him. If he was Eddie Hall, he might have played him more, his dad. But no, Eddie Howe just didn't play him, and we didn't know what was going on. There was loads of talk about it. He kept getting asked about Lewis Hall, especially when Dan Burn was struggling at left back, which we've covered before. And he said that, Lewis Hall had to work on aspects and stuff like that. And I think it's probably been shown to be the correct thing. I think about Lewis Hall earlier on the season when we saw cameos of him in Dortmund where he was on the wrong side of a winger and defensively he just looked really naive. And then he went away and just, he wasn't getting games. Matt Ritchie was coming on instead of him and Dummett, we're thinking, what the fuck's going on here? Just, this kid's supposed to be signed for 28 million quid. And he went away and he'd done all that work. And anyone who saw the training videos, you could see Lewis Hall kind of buzzing around. Oh, there he is. He's still around. And he come back and he was just so much better defensively, Mark, than he was before. And he seemed to have just almost adapted to the Eddie Howe way of playing. But just looking at some of the stats for Lewis Hall. So 18 games he's played in the Premier League, 1 goal, and what a goal, by the way. 1 game in the Champions League. But looking at his stats as well, that's pretty much all of them are greens, and you would say that defensively, he's probably not as good as Livramento, and Livramento is not as good offensively as Lewis Hall. But, some of the stats there, Mark, as well, in terms of his shot total, 92nd percentile he's in, for a shot total. The lad loves to get forward and have a go. His kind of expected goals is 84th percentile. His shot creation chance is 72. His pass completion per game is 81%. Progressive passing's up in the 82nd percentile. 85% successful take-ons. 94th percentile tackles, 83rd interceptions, and 91st blocks. So all of the talk about Lewis Hall can't defend are kind of disproved there. But what I really like about the lad, he's so comfortable on the ball, Mark. He brings that kind of class and that quality at fullback that we just haven't had, certainly with Dan Burn there. I don't think I've actually seen a player like that at left back for Newcastle probably since John Beresford's days, in all fairness. Somebody that just can get up and down the park. And Lewis Hall seems to just have this boundless amount of energy, and he's so dangerous on the edge of the opposition box or in the box as well. A goal was coming, you could smell it. He had a couple of shots, prior, he scored that blinder in the cup. For me, and again, because he's only played a handful of games, this might sound a little bit harsh, but actually, I'm probably going to give him a 7, I think, because I just think Tino has probably played a little bit more and maybe done a bit more defensively. So I'm going to give Lewis Hall a 7. But the last few games, if I just took it as only them, he'd probably be up at an 8.5, probably because he's been absolutely superb. But I really think this lad could be our starting left back next season, Mark. Everyone was talking about buying experienced left back. The lad's 19 years old. People are saying he maybe should be unlucky not to get a call in for the England squad. The way he's played towards the run of the season, I think this lad is a phenomenal player, and I think he could be one of the best left backs Newcastle's ever had, and maybe even England one day, mate. What's your score for Lewis Hall?
So, yeah, it's really difficult because of that early season, because he wasn't playing, because I think there were those mistakes early doors, and it is a relatively new position at that level because he'd not really done it. I think I go with a 6 for him, but that's a 6, and he's improving because again, you look towards the end of the season and I think he said himself that he felt that he wasn't ready. He had to spend time
same
learning.
as Gordon said the year before about Eddie Howe.
Exactly. He's the prime example of where you start and not hit the ground running, and then come in after a pre-season and coming after that time with Eddie Howe, time working with the coach and the players.
Cue Lewis Hall turning into Roberto Carlos next season then and being in the play the team of the year for the PFA.
If he's somewhere between Roberto Carlos and Ashley Cole, you're onto a winner. So
he's all right. He'll be all right, mate.
I mean, my God, what a player he would be if he's somewhere in that regard.
Yeah,
but he's been exceptional late on, and I think again I talked about the kind of inverted plays. Tottenham are a prime example of this. Manchester City are as well, where their fullbacks start to come inside and they start to drive with the ball as well. Doggie's a brilliant one at being able to run with the ball through the midfield. You look at the last 2 or 3 games for Newcastle, and Lewis Hall is doing exactly that. He glides with the ball through the midfield.
Oh, he's brilliant with the ball at his feet. Close control is amazing. Yeah.
And there's a lot of that comes from the fact that he was so comfortable playing in midfield as well.
Yeah.
So that the ability to move with the ball is huge, especially from fullback, and you get the outcomes as well. And again, this is something that you want to see from the left hand side of Newcastle's defence, or from their fullbacks, is shots, assists, big chances created for the strikers or for the forward players or midfielders. That's what we want to see from him going forward, and he's getting into the right areas. And God, that was the clip of the 2 of them, where the furthest 2 players forward were Tino Livramento and Lewis Hall, and Livramento's crossing the ball to Lewis Hall. That's the sign of things to come, I think, for them, where they are going to play really, really high up the field, where they're going to be able to get forward, and they've got the pace, they've got the nous to be able to come back and defend, and with the players around them, the ability to fill in when they do that. But there's a huge future ahead for Lewis Hall. I've really enjoyed watching him the last few games, and I think there's say it again. I think he's the starter next season. I think he's the left back of the future. He's the one that it built around from that position. Because otherwise you stifle him. I bet if you brought in a starting left back now, I think you possibly stifle Lewis Hall's progression. He needs the game time. He's proved. I think he's proved that he deserves that game time now.
Yeah, I agree. They remind me a lot of when Trent and Robertson were first starting to change the way the fullbacks were playing in the Premier League for Liverpool. That these two give me that same kind of buzz, and they're obviously black and white shirts, which is incredible. So it's a no-brainer for me. Keep Lewis Hall. Same for you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's only just signed permanently, so
he can't sell him already.
Not sell, exactly, but despite the rumours that like Dortmund were the move for him, and I was like, hang on, he hasn't even actually had his permanent.
The best one was Chelsea fans thinking that the deal wasn't done and they could get him back in the summer. That was the best one. That was the highlight for me. But you're right, Mark. I think we're both in agreement on Lewis Hall. Moving on, we'll talk about the left back of the future, which is Lewis Hall. We've got a couple of left backs of the past. Matty Target. Matty Target is this is where my score drops considerably low. So Matty Target's only played 3 Premier League games and 2 Champions League games. He's played so little games, FBref haven't even bothered their arse to score him. The truth of the matter is, Matty Target came to Newcastle on loan from Aston Villa, and he was brilliant. He wasn't as offensively good as Kieran Trippier, but he was a real solid left back. He offered protection there. He was able to get forward and give the ball to the winger, and he looked really good. We signed him on a permanent, and since we signed him on a permanent, he's really done fuck all, to be honest with you. He's really regressed. He's not been great. There was rumours of his missus, I think, wanting to head back to the Midlands or something like that. He was linked to some Midlands clubs at the time. He's been injured perpetually for the majority of the season. He seems to get injured and then injured again and again and again. I'm going to give Matty Target a 2 out of 10, and I would get rid. That's my opinion on him.
Yeah, when I think 35 games missed through injury this season, 15 games missed through injury last season. The time has come to cut the cord with Matty Target.
Time to
incredibly, like you mentioned, he's on £100,000 a week now.
£100,000 a week he's on. I nearly forgot about that. Clear the fucking wage bill. Get rid of the bloke.
Insane.
Get a proper player on £100,000 a week. Fucking move him along, mate.
It's time for him to move on because he's not at the level Newcastle want to be at. And I've said that about a few, and we'll say that about
he's
mid-table.
Well. He's mid the bottom table Premier League club is what he is, I think, now.
Yeah, and it's funny because obviously he came from Southampton, didn't he? And he'd done particularly well with them before he got his move on to Villa, and he had that decent link up with Grealish down that left hand side, and he looked really promising. But there's always a mistake in Matty Target. He's not quite as adventurous enough. He's nowhere near as good on the ball as Lewis Hall, and I just don't see that there's a future for him at the club. I don't think there can be because he's not at that level. He's not good enough to be playing in European competition for Newcastle now, and I think you maybe right. Look at it, potentially one of the promoted sides coming in for him. Maybe it's even a return to Southampton or something like that. But it's time for him to move on. The difficulty will be his wages and being able to move him on with that amount of money. I think he's still got 2 years left on his contract as well. I think his expires in 2026. So it'd be a tough one, but I think he's definitely one that needs to be moved on because he just absolutely offers nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. We're totally agreeing with that. What's your mark out of 10 for Matty Target?
I don't think I can score him. I mean, I know you gave him a 2. I mean, I don't think he's. I mean, FB Ref have kind of hit the nail on the head with him because he's not played enough minutes. He's played 78 minutes in the Premier League this season. He played less than 700 minutes in the Premier League last season. I can't score him because you just haven't seen him this season. No, I give him a 0 based on the fact that I can't give him a score because you just don't see him.
So Matty's off target for you, but I'm here all week. Yeah. So moving on to the next player now. Eddie Howe is apparently made noises that we might see another year of Paul Dummett. I'm not going to lie, I was sick in my mouth a little bit. You know, the only thing that Paul Dummett has done this season successfully was doing RKO against Dominic Calvert-Lewin in St James's Park and give away a penalty. He's played 5 games, or matches played 5 games, 20 minutes in total. Paul Dummett has been at this football club for what seems to be about 42 years, and he's played about 42 games. He is a Geordie lad. I love the fact he's come through the ranks now. He seems like a lovely character and a real good lad, but this guy offers nothing to Newcastle United. He's held together with twigs and berries. He's injured all the time, perpetually. He's never really kicked on at all. He had a good season in the Championship with us, a hard, honest working player, but he's exactly what's wrong with the club at the minute in terms of sentiment and not moving on from players. The only reason I think that he might hang around is the homegrown player rule for European football, but he's just not good enough for me, and we need to cut the cord and get rid. He's 32-year-old. Put him into the youth academy as a coach or something like that or whatever, because he might be able to offer something there, but as a player he offers nothing. I think I was too generous on Matty Target. I'm going to give Dummett a 2.5, I think, just because he's a Geordie. He gets another half a mark off me because he's a Geordie. And the RKO was a great move. It really was, even though it was a penalty. So definitely get rid for me, Mark, 100%. We shouldn't have a player like that still on our books. Taking up a squad place, not for me. He's on chump change wages-wise, but time to get rid, mate.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, 20 minutes. And again, like Target, I don't think I can score him.
You can't really score him.
He's played 200 minutes in total this season. That's including the League Cup and 1 minute in the FA Cup that he's had.
I'm changing my score. I'll give Matty Target a 1 and Dummett a 2. There you go. There you go.
The City game, I mean, I thought he was really good. It was the City game in the Cup
It
earlier on in the
was when he
season.
was centre
He was
half.
very,
Yeah.
very good. Yeah, and to
And
be
Man U,
fair,
he was good against Man U as well, to be fair. Yeah.
very, very good performance in that. But he's a body on the bench. That's all he is now. He's played 209 games in 11 seasons for Newcastle.
It's fucking shocking. That's shocking.
It's an average of 19. Now, if you consider 3 of those seasons were 45 games in the Championship, 23 and 25 in the Premier League, that leaves 116 games left over 8 seasons, which is about 14 a season. And again, another couple of those seasons are 20 and 26. And then you look at the last ones. He played 3 games last season. The season before last. 0 games in the Premier League last season. And he's appeared in 5 games for a total of 20 minutes this season. I understand the need to have homegrown players in the squad, but you have homegrown players in the squad depending on who stays,
Exactly.
and you have younger
Once
players.
we get into the midfield, we'll see that, and better players as well. Yeah.
Is it worth having Paul Dummett on the bench,
No.
or is it worth leaving one position free in the squad to free up what he? I just don't. I don't understand the wish to have him and Richie still around the club next season.
No.
As great a pro as they might be,
especially when you've got 2 players under 21 in Hall and Miley that don't take up a squad place in Europe because of their ages, isn't it? So
well, they do it, but I think that, and that's part of it because they want the homegrown players. So you have to have the 4 that are homegrown at the club.
yeah,
Now,
true.
Miley will tick one of those boxes, but he's young enough to not take up a squad space in the first place.
Yeah.
So then you're looking at the likes of Gillespie and Sean and
Anderson.
Dummett. That's 3, and Anderson would be your 4th. And that sort of makes sense. But is he going to play?
No,
if he's
never.
a body in that squad, why keep him around just to not do anything? It doesn't make any sense to me. He's not going to play. His numbers have dwindled beyond, the floor now. It's time to move on. Again, with Dummett, I think I'll give him a 2 just based on his performance against City alone because I thought he was exceptional in that game.
He deserves that for that. Yeah.
But I think that's it. You can't go any higher. I'd be tempted to give him the same as Target just because I haven't seen him enough. But that one performance would give him some points in his locker. But at the moment, he's an empty squad space. Really is.
So I've just to confirm, I've knocked Matty Target down to 1 and Paul Dummett has 2 for me. I'm saying get rid. What are you saying? 2 out of 10 and get rid?
Move him on. Yeah, move him on.
Yeah, definitely. And last, but probably least as well, to be fair, Emil Kraft. So I don't want to be too harsh on Emil Kraft. Emil Kraft's what I would call a utility player. He can play centre half, as he's done an all right job at, thanks to injuries, and he can play fullback as well. Now, the whole question of do you get rid or what is irrelevant because he signed a new contract. But he played 17 times in the Premier League. Looking at his stats, defensively, I mean, tackles are good. He's in the 87th percentile. Blocks and clearances, etc. Aerials are pretty poor. Shot creation chances aren't too bad. He can get up and down the line and whip a cross in. Progressive carries are decent. He's in the 86th percentile. Progressive passes in the 99th percentile. So he does have a little elements of his game, does Emil Kraft, in terms of offering something a bit more than the likes of a Paul Dummett, Matt Ritchie would be. He's 29 years old. He's obviously got experience, Swedish international. He's only on 55 grand a week, so he doesn't take up a great massive wedge of the wage. He's already been signed on a new contract extension, so we can't say keep or sell. Out of 10, I'm probably going to give Emil Kraft a 5, I think, which might sound a bit harsh. He has missed a lot of games through injury, but I think he's come in when needed, played in multiple positions and done an all right job. Nothing flash, nothing amazing, but just used the ball well enough, defended okay when he had to. But I'm going to give him a 5 out of 10 mark. And obviously we are keeping him because he's signed a new contract. So what's your take on Kraft?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those ones where you sort of question the extended contract and the extra year to go, well, is this another one where is it absolutely worth it? I think he's kind of shown a little bit of his worth in the last part of the season.
His versatility, I think, is a big thing.
Yeah,
same with Jacob Murphy in a way when we're getting to the midfielders. Yeah,
if you look at the last games of the season, so you go from where he started, and he started the games back in the beginning of April against Everton, the 1-1 draw. So he's 90 minutes right the way through, except the Sheffield United game where he came on at half time. Of those, what is that, 9 games? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games, lost 2. The record has been pretty good with him in the team. I think Emil Kraft has performed very well. There's times where he's a little bit caught out. There are a number, particularly a couple of occasions where he gets himself forward, and you see the difference in terms of him and Tino Livramento. The recovery runs just on there from Emil Kraft, but he will work hard. There was one in particular, I think, against Brentford, where he really busted a gut to get himself back in and prevent an attack. But it wasn't Brentford. It was against Brighton because it was at home, and he really got himself back and into position. But I think he's done a good job. I can't argue with the fact that he's been thrown in. He's been thrown into a relatively untried position in that regard because he is naturally a wider defender or a fullback.
Cut and shut defence as well, really, and piece together.
Well, exactly.
Get out of position, yeah.
And he's done a pretty decent job alongside Dan Burn, and I would give him a 5 for that based on those last 9 games alone. He's bit part earlier on. He hasn't got an awful lot of minutes in total. Particularly in the in the Premier League, I think is a total of 661. No, that's touches. Where's my minutes gone? They've disappeared off my screen in front of me. Found it. 900. There you go. 930 minutes. So sort of 10 full games. I think the big chunk of those have been the last games of the season. I think he's done a really good job. He's really been part of that defence that's held together at the end and allowed Newcastle to get that position, get that 7th place where there's the potential of European football. And I think he deserves a relatively decent score. Again, not an awful lot of football to judge on, but those last 9 games, I think he's done a really, really good job. Again, you keep him because you have to keep him. He's just signed that, obviously, the extension that will keep him through until the end of next season. And he's a bit of a utility man as well that will give you cover at both centre-back and at full-back.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fair summary, I would say, for Emil Kraft. We're on the same page on that one. So that's us all wrapped up then for goalkeepers and defence, guys. Thank you so much for watching along. And as I said, smash a comment in. We'll check that out at a later stage. Let us know whether you agree or disagree with our scores and who we would keep and sell. We always like to hear from you. And if you do like what you see, smash subscribe. Help get us to 8,000 subscriber mark. We really appreciate it. Like the video too. Help the channel grow. We're going to be back to do my favorite one, the midfielder show next. I'm really looking forward to that one. I'd love to get stuck into that one. And then the attackers will follow after that. We'll even score the manager too. So keep it evermore, guys. Check out for the videos. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of these. We will be giving you content over the closed season, even though the season has stopped. The rumor has it Mill is firing already. Mark's computer is smoking. We've got that many stats to cover. So keep it evermore, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you later. Have a good one.